Okay, so let's get started. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining in. As always, it's a big pleasure to see and to hear you today, and we hope that all of you are doing well and that you managed as well to charge your batteries during this webinar, during this summer, sorry. And welcome all. It's nice to having you on board. Donc bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci de nous avoir rejoindre aujourd'hui. C'est un vrai plaisir de vous entendre et j'espère que vous êtes en forme et que vous avez réussi aussi à recharger vos batteries pendant cet été et soyez les bienvenus. So my name is Nelly, as I said, and I'm the Communications and Engagement Officer at ADEPT. And today I will be your host. Our today's webinar is a joint collaboration and partnership with Concord, and we're gonna cover in this webinar an exciting topic, which is the future European Union ACP partnership and various legal frameworks such as the Cotonou Agreement and the Joint Africa-Europe Strategy that run this partnership. For those of you who don't know, Concord is the European Confederation of Relief and Development NGOs based in Brussels, Belgium, and Concord is working to strengthen the impact of the European development NGOs vis-à-vis the European institution and to positively influence the European development policies. But I will leave Karine, our today's speaker, to provide you with more information on the organization in just a couple of moments. Je vous propose de commencer le webinaire. Donc, je m'appelle Nelly, comme je viens de vous dire. Je suis la responsable des communications et d'engagement à ADEPT. Donc, je serai l'animatrice de webinaire d'aujourd'hui. Ce webinaire, c'est une collaboration et un partenariat avec Concord et nous allons couvrir un sujet très passionnant qui est le futur partenariat entre l'Union européenne et les pays ACP et les divers cadres juridiques tels que l'accord du Cotonou et la stratégie commune Afrique-Europe qui gèrent ce partenariat. Pour celles et ceux d'entre vous qui ne le savent pas, Concord, c'est une confédération européenne des ONG de secours et de développement basée à Bruxelles, en Belgique. Concord travaille pour renforcer l'impact des ONG européennes de développement sur les institutions européennes et influence de manière positive les politiques européennes de développement. Mais je vais laisser Karine, notre intervenante d'aujourd'hui, pour vous fournir plus d'informations sur l'organisation juste dans un instant. I will just take you through some technical points as usual. First, I would really ask you to keep your micros muted and unmute them when the floor for discussions and exchanges is open by clicking on the micro button in the chat box in front of your name. Also, feel free to use the chat box for any questions and comments during the webinar. We will address them after the presentation in the questions and answers session. Last but not least, as you know, we have both English and French-speaking participants. Thank you once again for joining. And we will provide consecutive translation from English to French and vice versa. Avant de vous laisser à Karine, je voudrais juste vous présenter quelques points techniques. Premièrement, je vous demanderai de garder vos micros inactifs et de les réactiver pendant la session des questions-réponses après la présentation. En outre, n'hésitez pas aussi à utiliser le chat pour poser la question. On va essayer de répondre à toutes les questions après la partie de présentation. Et aussi, comme nous avons des participants anglophones et francophones, on va fournir bien évidemment une traduction de l'anglais en français et vice-versa. So, as you probably know, the Cotonou Partnership Agreement signed in 2000 is one of the most comprehensive frameworks of cooperation between the European Union and the countries of ACP. And this partnership is run by the legal framework which focuses on poverty eradication and inclusive sustainable development for both ACP and EU countries. Currently, a new agreement is being negotiated, and the important challenges our world is facing now, such as economic growth and jobs, increasing inequalities, sustainable development and peace, mobility and security issues have to be taken into account while shaping this new era. In addition, we should not forget traditional and new development actors of the process that should be fully associated to the negotiation, such as civil society organizations and diaspora leaders and groups. Today with Karine Sohe, I I really hope, Karine, that I pronounce it correctly. If not, just correct me.
It is.
Karine, sorry?
It is correct.
Great, thank you. So, Karine is the chair of the Concord Working Group on EU-ACP and Africa relations. And together with Karine, we will try to learn more about the negotiation process and the challenges and opportunities it presents for civil society and diaspora. And in the same time, we will analyze the development and migration issues in the context of the EU-Africa relations and future new frameworks. Donc, comme vous le savez probablement, l'accord des partenariats de Cotonou était signé en 2000 et il constitue l'une des cadres de coopération les plus complets entre l'Union européenne et les pays d'Afrique, de Caraïbes et du Pacifique, ACP. Le partenariat régi par ce cadre juridique est axé sur l'éradication de la pauvreté et le développement durable inclusif pour les pays ACP et l'Union européenne. Actuellement, donc, un nouvel accord est en cours de négociation et les défis importants auxquels notre monde est confronté actuellement, tels que la croissance économique et la création d'emplois, les inégalités croissantes, le développement durable et la paix, la mobilité et la sécurité doivent être prises en considération lors de la construction de cette nouvelle ère. En outre, nous ne devons pas aussi oublier les acteurs nouveaux et traditionnels qui doivent être aussi pleinement associés à ce processus de négociation. Et on vise vraiment les organisations de la société civile et les organisations de la diaspora. Et aujourd'hui, avec Karine Sohe, qui est la présidente du groupe de travail de Concorde sur les relations EU, ACP et Afrique, nous essayerons d'apprendre davantage sur le processus de négociation entre les deux parties, ainsi que sur les défis et les opportunités qu'elle présente pour la société civile et la diaspora. Et donc, nous allons aussi analyser les questions de développement et d'immigration dans le contexte des relations Union européenne-Afrique et les nouveaux cadres futurs. Donc, Karine, thank you so much for your availability and for this great experience that you're going to share today with us. And we are looking already forward, and we give you the floor. Donc, Karine, merci beaucoup pour votre disponibilité et surtout pour cette unique expérience que vous allez partager aujourd'hui avec nous. Et nous sommes impatients de vous entendre et donc vous avez la parole.
Merci, Nelly. Donc voilà, comme Nelly l'a dit, mon nom est Karine Sohe. Je travaille à Act Alliance EU, qui est un réseau d'ONG de développement lié aux églises protestantes ici en Europe, mais qui fait partie d'un réseau global qui est Act Alliance. Et je suis, comme l'a dit Nelly, la actuelle présidente du groupe de travail de Concorde sur les questions UE-ACP. So I introduce myself. So Karine Sohe, I'm working at Act Alliance EU, which is a network of development NGOs linked to the Protestant churches in Europe. We are also part of a global network called Act Alliance, and I'm indeed the chair of the Concord Working Group on EU-ACP. So maybe the first slide. Thank you. So I was asked to share with you some information on the work that Concord is doing on EU-ACP, as well as a background information on what's happening with the current negotiation. So I will start with the work done by civil society on the issue, and then we will go into the official process. So I just wanted to share a few words with you on Concord. So as Nelly said, Concord is the European Confederation of Relief and Development NGOs. We have 28 national associations and 25 international networks that are members of Concord. In total, it makes around 2,600 NGOs in Europe. So Concord has a strategy, of course, with two main objectives. The first is to make sustainable development a reality for all and to make sure that European policy promotes sustainable economic, social, and human development. And the second is also to make sure that we have a good sharing and learning space for civil society in Europe on development issues, and to make sure that the rights and responsibilities of citizens and organized civil society are promoted and respected by the EU. Concord advocacy work is organized in different hubs, as we call them. These are mega working groups. And there is one on sustainable development and policy coherence for sustainable development. There is one on financing sustainable development, one on promoting civil society space, and one on global citizenship education and engagement. And the work that Concord is doing on EU-ACP and EU-Africa relations is, of course, related to sustainable development and policy coherence, and also to civil society space. So we are situated in this hub 3, but in fact, we are working on the whole agenda.
Okay. So would you like me to translate rapidly, maybe? Karine?
Yes. Do you think that is necessary? It depends on the members. I don't know if people need.
Yeah, our dear participants, just let us know whether you really need any translation, or I can just sum up. Anyways, you.
I can do it in French also, but I'm wondering whether if we have, if everybody is speaking French or English, then we could do it in one language alone. But
Olivier, chers participants, si vous avez vraiment besoin d'une traduction en français, juste dites-nous-le. Comme ça, on essaye de faire ça. Donc, pour Olivier Bas, Mirana, ok.
Je peux aussi faire le webinaire en français. Hein. Je parle les deux langues, donc c'est ce que vous préférez.
Ce qu'on peut faire, when you probably speak in English, we try to display the French speaking, maybe, I don't know, slides. Just
yeah.
To be comfortable. I don't know. Just
okay.
The participants.
Let's try like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Good. So next one.
Move on.
So yes, I will not explain the whole slide. You can read that afterwards. But I just wanted to tell you that Concord is working on the issue for a long time. So we have this working group since Concord was established in 2003. And so we took part in any consultation on the future EU-ACP agreement since the beginning of the process. So we took part in the online public consultation. We organized seminars for members, seminars with ACP partners, and also public events where we invited the officials to discuss the mandates for the negotiations. We also organized an event during the Joint Parliamentary Assembly in Malta. So everything is there. And when we organize those events and seminars, of course, we also develop position papers to influence the discussions. And so we have published several of them. And everything is that is public is available on the Concord website. And I've put the link so that you can see the positions that were developed by Concord on this issue. So it's quite a lot of work and the group is quite active. And we also have established good contacts and relationship with the people in the Commission who are leading the negotiation, and also with the permanent representation of the member states in Brussels to get regular updates on the negotiations. Yeah, next slide.
Okay.
So, the Concord is not the only actor, of course, at European level working on the EU-Africa relations. And there is also a small civil society committee that is called the EU Civil Society Committee on the Joint Africa-EU Strategy that was established quite quickly after the adoption of the joint strategy in 2007. So this committee role is to provide a platform for European civil society to work together to ensure the participation of civil society in the joint Africa-Europe strategy at all levels, and to exchange and display information on and expertise on the JAS-related issues. This civil society committee includes all interested European civil society organizations and not only development NGOs. It could be foundations, trade unions, environmental, so on. The diaspora organizations would, of course, be very welcome in this committee as well. It's an open committee. There is a steering group in this committee that is also trying to maintain a close contact with African partners, counterparts in civil society, but this is not an easy task because on the African side, there is a lack of coordination and capacities to maintain an active group, and also because of interference with the Economic and Social Committee of the African Union that is there more or less only recognized civil society organ on the African Union side. So sometimes it is difficult to work with the African Union Commission on civil society issues because of that. And it has been challenging, but we succeeded to organize several civil society forums ahead of the EU-Africa summits. The last one was in Tunis, and it was a few months before the EU-AU Abidjan summit in 2017. This group of JAS Civil Society Committee is not able to coordinate everything related to EU-Africa relations, of course. There are many processes going on, and you probably know about the Valletta, Khartoum, Rabat processes around migration issues, or the processes related to trade negotiations, the European Partnership Agreements, and there is also an EU-Africa human rights dialogue and so on. And there are different civil society actors following these different processes, and we try to coordinate as much as possible, but this is not always possible. Next. So it's okay, everybody is following so far, I hope. Stop me if it is not the case. I also wanted to say a few words about the fact that ACP civil society is also trying to organize itself to engage on the EU-ACP relations and the negotiations. But it is even more difficult, of course, considering that there are 3 regions involved, and creating a civil society coordination mechanism between Caribbean, Africa, and Pacific is not an easy task. It has been helped a bit by the fact that the ACP Secretariat in Brussels, so the official secretariat of the ACP group, organized a forum in 2017 where it was decided to establish an ACP non-state actors network. The network is still in the making, and it has asked to have an official inclusion and status in the EU-ACP negotiations as an observer status. And it also succeeded to convince the chief negotiator, Minister Ducey from Lomé, to organize a consultation of ACP civil society in Lomé in October. So this is in preparation, and we really hope that it will materialize. And then at the regional level, the African, Caribbean, and Pacific civil society are also trying to prepare themselves for negotiating the regional protocols. But you will understand more when I will present how the negotiations are going and what is the structure of the future agreement. Pacific civil society in particular is very active, and they published their recommendations for the future agreement already in February 2019. Next slide. So this is for the different initiatives on civil society side, and we can come back to that in the discussion to see whether you and your organizations would be interested to engage. If it is the case, I would be happy to provide you more information. Now, let's go to the official process and general background on the negotiations that are taking place for the moment. So, as Nelly said, the Cotonou Partnership Agreement is a legally binding agreement. This is important, based on principles and essential elements, and it is for 20 years. So 2020. So it will finish by end of February 2020. The European Union and the ACP group of member states are the signatories. So all the member states of the EU and the ACP are signatories of the agreement. So 79 ACP countries and 28 member states. And together they represent 1.7 billion people. They are, under the Cotonou Agreement, you know, there are joint institutions. There is a joint EU-ACP Council and there is a joint Parliamentary Assembly. Under the agreement, there is also, this is a partnership agreement, so there is a certain level of joint management of the European Development Fund. So the EU is putting at the disposal for cooperation with the ACP countries the European Development Fund, and that is a contribution coming directly from the member state. It is not part of the European Union budget. And this fund is certain aspects of the fund, like the intra-ACP envelope that covers activities for all ACP countries, are managed by the ACP Secretariat, for example. There is a certain level of joint management. The Cotonou Agreement is well known to be a comprehensive one, so organized on 3 pillars: development cooperation, trade, and political dialogue. But in the meantime, as the economic partnership agreements have been adopted, the trade aspect is now less important, and there are separate agreements on trade that are in discussion or sometimes already signed. Next slide. So the process of the renegotiation is started already in 2016. And the two parties, the EU and the ACP group, prepared their mandate for the negotiation. So they had long discussions about what they want to change, what they want to keep, whether they need to keep the ACP agreement or whether they should have separated regional agreements and so on. Everything was up for discussion. There were a lot of debates that took 2 or 3 years. And at the end, in June 2018, more or less, the two parties adopted their negotiating mandate for the future agreement. So there was on both sides a decision to keep an EU-ACP agreement and then decision to adopt directives for the negotiations. So that the negotiations should have started in August 2018, 18 months before the end of the end date of the agreement. But the beginning was a bit postponed because of an argument on the African side between the African Union and the sub-Saharan African members of the ACP, because the African Union was not convinced that this EU-ACP framework was the best one to negotiate issues such as security or migration with the EU. Finally, the members, the sub-Saharan African members of the African Union, who are the signatories of the ACP agreement, decided to go on with the ACP-EU agreement and not to a single AU-EU agreement. So I can come back on that later. Next slide. So the negotiation process, how does it take place? So it's negotiations at different level, and the most important level where the real discussions are taking place is the technical level, as it is called. So there is from the EC, the European Commission, DEFCO, Development Commission, Development Cooperation DG, is negotiating on behalf of the EU, and a team of ACP experts from the ACP Secretariat is on the side of the ACP. So they are negotiating at the technical level, really looking at the details of the text. The way it is taking place is that each side puts proposed text on the table, and then they see how these two texts are similar or not, how they can reconcile them, and if there are really contentious issues that they cannot agree on, then they put the text into brackets. When the text is sufficiently advanced, then it's submitted to a senior level of states representative, the so-called Central Negotiating Group on the ACP, that is composed of ambassadors, from 2 ambassadors from each of the 6 ACP regions. There are 4 regions in Africa, plus Caribbean and Pacific. And on the European side, the sounding board for the EC is the ACP Working Party in the Council, so representatives of the member states. But the member states consider that they have adopted the negotiating mandate, and so that the EC has to stick to it. And so what they look at is whether this is taking place and whether the EC is not deviating from the mandate that it was provided. Then at the higher level, at the ministerial level, there are also meetings from time to time. And the 2 chief negotiators, Commissioner Mimicha for Development on EU side and the Foreign Minister Robert Ducet from Togo, are taking the lead at this ministerial level, and they have meetings every few months to give the general direction of the negotiations. There was a meeting was supposed to take place in July, but it was postponed to September because they considered that the work hadn't advanced enough. So you see, this is really depending on the pace of the technical negotiations. At the end of 2018, the 2 chief negotiators and the ministers agreed on the future format of the agreement. And maybe if you put the next slide, Nelly.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, there you have the vision. So for the moment, the current agreement, as I said, is based on 3 pillars, as they call them: development, cooperation, trade, and political dialogue. And the future agreement will be organized differently. There will be a common foundation, EU-ACP, that will cover all ACP countries. And then there will be 3 regional protocols, so EU-Africa Protocol, EU-Caribbean, and EU-Pacific. So this is quite different, but in fact, the common foundation will include the provisions on political dialogue, on development cooperation, and on trade. Although, as I said, the economic partnership agreements are separate agreements, but they will make a link with them through the foundation. Next slide. So where are they in this negotiating process? So there are some parts that are making good progress and others that are more difficult. So they decided to start with the negotiations of the foundation, and the Commission hoped that they would finish that quite quickly and they could start negotiating the 3 regional protocols. But in fact, the negotiations on the foundations are not finalized yet. They are negotiating the 6 cooperation priority areas. And for the moment, they made good progress on 4 of them, naming the human development chapter, the environment and climate change chapter, the human rights and governance chapter, and the peace and security. These are quite advanced at the level of the foundation, and but there are still remaining brackets that will be discussed at a later stage. On the contrary, the negotiations on inclusive and sustainable economic development, another chapter that includes trade and investments, and on mobility and migration are still in progress. In certain cases, I am not sure whether they even started. These are more difficult chapters, clearly, because there is more divergence between the mandate of the ACP and the mandate of the EU on these issues. I will come back to that later. In parallel to those negotiations on the foundation, they also organized during the first semester of 2019 3 high-level regional consultation seminars. They were organized by the chief negotiators. There was one for Caribbean, one for Pacific, and one for Africa that took place in May in Eswatini, Swaziland. Negotiations on the protocols with Caribbean and Pacific countries already started over the summer in parallel with the foundation, but the negotiations on the Africa protocol will only start in September. They are led by Eswatini, Cameroon, and Ethiopia on the ACP side. Then, apart from the 6 priority areas, there are also other chapters in the foundation, of course. There is a preamble, there is a chapter on the means of cooperation, including ADF. There is a chapter on institutional setup and the role of the different actors and so on. And all this will be discussed at a later stage after September. So you see that there is still a lot to discuss. And so both sides had to recognize that they will not finalize these negotiations on time by end of February 2020, and they are preparing themselves for a 1-year delay. In fact, as the Commission said, the really deadline is the end of the current EDF, European Development Fund, that is at the end of next year. And so they have a bit more time. They think they have a bit more time, and they are already preparing proposals for transitional measures in case they are too late. And also there is a principle in these negotiations is that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So the foundation is binding for all ACP, but the protocols, even if they can be revised more easily or they are more like strategies and easier to revise, more like action plans as well, they are also binding. So everything in this agreement will be binding for the 2 parties. And so it is important that there is an agreement on the whole of it, and they cannot have partial agreements on the different parts. So that's why also it takes quite a lot of time, also because they have to make sure that everything is coherent. Next one. So also, because you are organizations working on from the African diaspora, so I wanted to also to try to explain also why it is a bit more complicated and a bit more delayed for Africa. So as you know, the African Union is an important partner of the EU through the Joint Africa-EU Strategy, the JAS, adopted in 2007 in Lisbon. And this strategy is reviewed every 3 years since at the EU-Africa summits. And you don't have EU-ACP summits. You have a joint EU-ACP council that is at ministerial level, but you don't have ACP heads of states and EU heads of states meeting, but you have EU-Africa summit. So it shows also the difference in terms of political dialogue between the two frameworks of cooperation. In addition to that, you know that the EU also is launching regularly new initiatives about cooperation with Africa. There was the trust fund, emergency trust fund on migration. There is now the EU-Africa Alliance for Growth and Jobs. So it makes a rather complicated setup for EU cooperation with Africa. So, and then in addition to that, you also have a separate framework for cooperation with Northern African countries. So you have the ACP, EU-ACP for Sub-Saharan Africa, and then you have the European Neighborhood Policy for North Africa. So it makes things very complicated, and it's a complaint that African Union already made several times towards the EU that they are not treating Africa as one. So in the course of 2018, there was a debate between as I said, between the African Union and its members on the value of maintaining the EU-ACP agreement. The African Union would have preferred to have only one partnership with the EU, that is the EU-AU partnership. And they also think that the ACP group is not the relevant group to discuss issues such as migration or peace and security. So there were a lot of discussions, and this was also a reason for delaying the start of the negotiations. But at the end, it was the decision of the Sub-Saharan African state that are signatories of the Cotonou Partnership Agreement to keep the EU-ACP agreement. And one of the reasons was also that they preferred to negotiate the new agreement as independent and individual states, and not to leave it to the African Union to negotiate on their behalf. The reason is, of course, that there is also a big pot of money that is attached to this EU-ACP agreement, which is the European Development Fund, and that is spent at the national level in each and every ACP country. So at the end, the African Union didn't get a mandate to negotiate, but there was an agreement that the African Union would send experts to support African states in their negotiations on the EU-Africa protocol and to make sure that it is in line with the African Union policies and 2063 strategy and so on. So this was the agreement. And how this is explained, also justified at the EU level, maybe in the next slide. Yeah, so the EU says, no, it's not a problem to have an EU-AU partnership and an EU-ACP partnership, because these are taking place at two different levels. The EU-AU partnership is more at the level of political guidance. It's more at the level of the political dialogue. And indeed, the EU recognized that issues of security, migration with the Valletta process and so on are discussed in another context than the EU-ACP. So they say that for the political guidance and the political process, all African countries discuss at the same level with the EU. Now, regarding formal decision-making on cooperation between the EU and the different African countries, the EU-ACP agreement will be an agreement that will apply to all sub-Saharan African countries. It's a kind of association agreement with the sub-Saharan African countries, and there will be a council to discuss that, EU Africa Council on the future protocol. And for North Africa, there are bilateral association agreements that will be maintained. So nobody will lose out in a way. That's a bit their way of saying that. So there will be equal legal relations with the EU for Sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa with different types of agreements. So I don't know whether the African Union is convinced, but well, they had to accept that it is the way the negotiations will be conducted. Next slide. So now about the content of the future agreement. So as I said, there will be provisions on what are the principles, what are the essential elements of the agreement, how should the political dialogue take place, and so on. What should we do together, EU-ACP at the international level? All this will be part of the agreement. In addition, there will be a chapter also on the means of cooperation and on the institutions. But so far, the discussions were mainly about what should we cooperate on together? What should be the priority cooperation areas of priority for cooperation? And so, as I said, there are 6 areas identified, and 2 of them are more problematic. So the discussions on economic development and migration and mobility are delayed because the interests of both parties are more divergent on these issues than on others. But it doesn't mean that there are no divergence on human rights and democracy or sexual and reproductive health and rights, civil society space, and so on in the other chapters. But these are in brackets. So, but more or less they agreed on the general text, but there are still brackets. And the brackets are mainly on the points that I put there on the slide. For the economic development chapter, on both sides, they put a lot of emphasis on this, growth, jobs, and so on. This is, the big discussion, how to support economic growth in Africa, to create jobs for the youth, and so on. They agree on the general objectives, but they have a different focus in their mandate. The EU is more focused on trade and investments and leveraging private finance for development in Africa and so on, while the ACP side is more focused on industrialization, creating local value chains and value added, and diversification of their economy and so on. So they still have to find a common understanding of what they want to do on economic development. But this should be okay. I think there are no major divergences. But on migration issues, it will be more difficult, probably. In general, everybody says that this will be the most difficult chapter. And the EU mandate talks on migration, on the rights of migrants, on the migration and development and so on, but still you can feel that there is a strong focus on the fact that all relevant policy areas must be used to stem irregular migration and to return migrants irregularly residing in third countries. This is really clearly an objective of the EU. It's already there in discussion between the EU and the ACP for a long time about the readmission agreements and so on. So on the ACP side, of course, they highlight different needs. They talk about intra-ACP migration, promotion of legal migration, importance of remittance flows, need for returns and readmission to be voluntary, and also to avoid the fact that the development aid is used and conditioned by negotiating border controls and so on. So even if the EU mandate is more than just stemming irregular migration, it's there. And you know that several member states are in favor of that, so they couldn't escape in a way. As soon as they started the discussion with the Council, those issues came into line. And so it will be difficult, and it will be a kind of also bargaining at the end between the different chapters. And we hope that that the ACP group will stay strong on those issues. But we don't know for the moment what is exactly under discussion for these two chapters. Next slide. So also, as I said, so Concord is working a lot on the space for civil society and the role of civil society in development and in the political dialogue and so on. So for us, the new agreement is also an opportunity to secure the role and the space of civil society in EU-Africa relations, and also to bind both parties to a number of essential elements such as human rights, rule of law, freedom of association, other fundamental freedoms that are essential for civil society. So the EC is very supportive of maintaining and strengthening the role of civil society in the future agreement. And they want to make sure that there are proper principles and mechanisms in the future agreement to allow that. And there is strong support of certain member states on this, not all of them, of course. On the ACP side, in general, they prefer to talk about non-state actors, so which means civil society and the private sector. And they put more and more emphasis on the private sector. But they are also in favor of maintaining a role for civil society and non-state actors in the political dialogue. But, you know, some member states on the ACP side, they are a bit afraid that they don't want to interfere with their national laws regarding civil society. So this is still under discussion and not solved for the moment in the text of the future agreement. The two negotiating mandates are public documents, so you can read them. We have commented them, ACP civil society as well. They have been consulted also by the ACP Secretariat on the mandate. But since the negotiation started, there was no consultation of civil society on the content of the negotiations or on the future text of the agreement. We organized a seminar in July where 3 African partners were invited to discuss civil society participation in the future agreement with the EC. And after that meeting, the African partners, they approached the chief negotiator Ducé in Lomé to ask for a consultation of civil society, and it seems that they were successful and that there will be a consultation at the end of October, ACP civil society consultation in Lomé. So, as I said, Caribbean and Pacific negotiations already started for the regional protocols, and civil society. It seems that civil society is trying to influence that, and that they are consulted on this. For the African civil society, they still have to push for consultation by the African negotiators. But you know, consultation is not taking place in the EU neither. We get information through our contacts and so on, but it's so far we couldn't have an open consultation of civil society on the issues that are negotiated for the moment. So it's not only on the African side that it is difficult. I think I finished there.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much, Karin. So you have now the slides with Concord in contact details. So if you are passionate about the topics and about the issue we've been discussing now, we invite you to follow Concord through social media and their website. And Karin, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really amazing, and we understand how complex it is and how challenging for all the parties involved. And I've just have also a couple of questions because the topic is really interesting, but maybe we can leave the floor to our participants for the moment to start. If you, dear participants, if you have any questions related to this interesting presentation and all the information shared, just go on. And then if time is left, I will ask also mine. Okay, so let me just open the chat box. Just you can speak. You have the floor. I guess Sheitata, you've asked the question. Just don't hesitate. Hello, hello. Sheitata, you activate your micro to speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I want to thank Karin for that wonderful presentation. And my question is about when I look at these issues and when she spoke about the EU's position of always trying to see how they can get these migrants back into home countries, I have always had a worry that I can't still understand why the EU, likewise the UN, always do not want to help in the preventations of these migrants and come in all the time in times of emergencies to help. Why is it that they prefer to provide assistance and give room for migrants to quit their home countries instead of intervening and preventing them when there are situations and crises, especially in Africa? That's my question.
Thank you very much. Karin, go on if you want to answer now. Otherwise, all the participants just you can also write the questions in the chat box.
And I just want to add that there is a serious crisis in Mexico. If we are not seeing, a lot of Africans are stranded there, struggling to get into America. And these are situations where we could stop. It is really, really as serious as that of the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah, well, I'm not a specialist on migration. I have a colleague working on this exclusively because it's really a topical issue for the moment in all EU policies, as you know. Yeah. I think that the EU is trying to do a bit of everything, and maybe is at the end not very effective in any of this. So they talk about addressing the root causes of migration, but in fact that there are sometimes also they have their assumption about what are the root causes of migration, and maybe they are not really addressing the real causes. So this is already a problem. But indeed, the role of the EU in preventing crises, in preventing displacement of people and so on is too limited. I agree with you. They are generally in the reaction rather than the prevention. Mm-hmm. Also on the whole question of conflict and even climate change and so on. So indeed, this is really an important issue. But you know, this whole question about sending migrants and refugees back is highly political question. It's more an issue of internal policies, internal politics, I would say, in the EU member states than a real issue of how should we address the phenomenon of displacement and migration as a whole. So that's a bit the problem, that decisions are taken on the wrong basis, on the wrong assumptions, and for political reasons. And this is never, of course, good. It cannot lead to any long-term sustainable and right response. This is really a pity. I completely agree with you. I don't know, Nelly, we discussed the fact that maybe there could be another webinar where we could go more in depth into certain issues that are really key for your members in these EU-Africa relations. And I think this would be the occasion to discuss about EU response to the migration issue.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning
people
as well. Yeah, the idea is, yes, this webinar was the first one just to make an introduction to the process, because if you've seen from the presentation, it's a quite complex process with a lot of actors involved, with a special place for civil society. And now we have also to think about altogether about what place the African diaspora could take in this process, in order to share also the insights and to share the feedback on this for this negotiation. That's why we thought maybe the first webinar to be more as an introduction into the topic, and the second one, of course, after your first feedback and impressions, to schedule the second one, which will be more targeted and will aim at really identify together with you the possible means and ways of diaspora engagement, taking into consideration that we have the Concord partnership now, and Concord has different hubs and working groups on EU-Africa, and what could be the possible means and ways the African diaspora can join and contribute to the negotiation. So you're right.
But if I may add on this issue of the EU-Africa cooperation on migration, let's call it like that. You know, there is this Valletta action plan, and that has different priorities or objectives. There are 5 different areas of work that cover a quite broad range of actions in this area, including legal migration, remittances, return readmission, but also migration management, as they call it, which is mainly border control. And so the EU is working on these different areas, and the Emergency Trust Fund for Africa on migration. If you look at what they are doing, it's more or less 70% of the actions are more longer term, addressing the root causes of migration, and 30% is really about managing migration flows, which is a lot about controlling migration flows. So just to give you an idea about what the EU is doing in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Karin. And just wanted also to add that basically, speaking about the Emergency Trust Fund, we've been talking a lot about migration, which is very important to development, and addressing the root causes of migration. It's not a very correct already approach.
Yeah.
And we've even produced together, and at the time it was with Coordination Sud, a publication on the use of this emergency trust fund funds, and basically the most part of it was used to stem migration and to stem migrants, and to was used to well, to send back migrants. And unfortunately, despite all the efforts that civil society does, the Diaspora organization do in the field, different awareness raising campaigns on the positive contribution of migrants, our voices are not heard, or maybe not taken into account expressively, we don't know. But yeah, this is one of the issues that we have also to reinforce and
but we must, it doesn't mean that we should stop talking. And I think that this discussion between the EU and the ACP is also an opportunity, because on the African side, we have quite some resistance at the African Union and the African states and so on. So civil society should support them in their negotiations on this issue.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, and that's why we as the African diaspora are ready as well to be associated to this process, and just we have to find the place where we can best use and share our expertise and experience. Okay, so do we have any other questions? Go on, the floor is open. Okay, so we have Franz, could you elaborate? Franz, go on. I've seen your question in the chat box, but it would be maybe more nice to hear you as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think a big question is the future of the EDF. I mean, maybe I missed it at the beginning a little bit, but will it be in the EU budget? How it will be distributed or allocated to the different regions? Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about this. It's a big amount.
Yes, it is indeed. Thank you, Franz, for the question. I recognize your name. I think you are, aren't you also in this civil society committee on the jazz? So. No?
Yes, I am
well,
formally.
You receive information from time to time. I must say we have not been very active recently. Anyway.
But it's quite important, because I can tell you that it's important input for our debates in Austria, also the discussions with the ministries.
Sure. So on the EDF, indeed. So it's I didn't well it was an issue of time, so I didn't want to talk too much about the EDF, because there is not so much to say in terms of decision. But so I said the European Development Fund is financing cooperation between the EU and the ACP countries. It is a fund that is outside the EU budget. It is a 5 to 7 years fund where the member states contribute directly with their development money. And the idea for the post-2020, the next EDF after 2020, is to integrate the EDF in the EU budget as a normal development cooperation instrument of the EU. But this would mean that it would be integrated into the big development cooperation instrument that they want to put in place. It would be a super big instrument, could be 90 billion euros in that instrument. It would cover all countries in the world, including the neighborhood of the EU. And all the thematic work, support to civil society, support to environment, climate, health, education, everything would be human rights, everything would be under the same big instrument. This is something that is under discussion in the framework of the future multi-annual financial framework of the EU, post-2020. But this decision of putting the EDF inside the EU budget, although it looks logical to have only one budget. There are many good reasons to do that. But there are also some fears, especially on the ACP side and on the side of those who think that the EDF is a better development instrument than the EU budget. But so this decision is not taken yet. This decision has to be taken at a high level at the EU, in the EU. It's not those people who are discussing the nitty-gritty of the future cooperation instrument who take this decision. It is the finance ministers. It is maybe the heads of states even. So as long as this decision of integrating the EDF in the budget is not taken, then it's a bit difficult to see what will happen to this EDF. The idea is that if it is integrated in this supra big instrument, then there would be one program for Africa, one program for Caribbean and Latin America, one program for Pacific and Asia. So already you would lose this all ACP, the ACP group would disappear with this new instrument. So the ACP members, of course, are not happy with that. And also, it's not sure whether they will have the same amount of money for the ACP, especially for the Caribbean and the Pacific, which are no priority for most of the member states. Africa is a big priority, but Caribbean and Pacific are not. It's not sure whether these, as I said, these joint management principles that exist in the EDF will be maintained. So there are many questions about how the future instrument for cooperation will be framed, governed, and how much money will be there for ACP countries. And the two discussions are completely separated. There is one discussion which is the future agreement, where they discuss priorities, principles, and so on. And then there is the discussions about the future budget that is an EU-only discussion, and that is a discussion in the hands of people who maybe don't even know what is exactly this EU-ACP agreement and so on, you know, finance ministers and so on. So it's not very good. It's a bit like the finance preceding the policy, you know. So that's what I can say about the EDF. So the decision should be taken by the end of the year, but you know, they are postponing their decision so often that nothing is sure.
Thank you, Karine. But is there any, coordination between finance and policy? Because one cannot go without another, you see. So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they are discussing this. For example, if you look at the consensus on development, I don't know if you know about that document. It's a document, a joint document, EEC plus member states, about what to do in the area of development. What is our development policy? There, it's covering a wide range of issues, you know. And so with this kind of instrument, like with the EU-ACP framework agreement, where you have these 6 priority areas and a wide range of issues mentioned, then after that, in terms of implementation, the EC and the EU delegations and the government on the ACP side as well, it's not just the EU side, they can pick and choose what they want to focus on. You know, so in a way, indeed, the finance the policy should guide the finance, but it's not really what is taking place, because the policy is quite vague and open and wide general agreements, and then the finance is guided by the programming that is taking place, where they identify strategic priorities for the coming years and so on, and where sometimes important issues are just left out. So, and also, as I said, there are other frameworks of cooperation that are already in place, the JAS I mentioned, but also the new Africa-EU Alliance for Jobs and Growth, and for the moment, the EC is discussing, the EU delegations are putting in place compacts on jobs and growth for each and every African countries. So when the money will be there, it will be used, part of it will be used to finance these compacts. So, you know, that's a bit the problem. You have a binding agreement with a joint agreement on what should be the priorities of cooperation, but at the same time, they are defined so widely that at the end, everything, it's a bit like the SDGs. Everything is there, so you can pick and choose.
But it's so wide and it's so big that, well, you're a bit lost.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah. For civil society, it's not always easy to understand what is important at the end. Yeah. What is really the guiding policy framework? It's sometimes very difficult to,
yeah, this is a question to keep in mind. And in the meantime, we also had a request from France. We have Ibra Yeli, who wanted to also to make a contribution. Ibra, please, you have the floor.
Hello, Ibra. Everybody.
Yes. Hi.
Good afternoon. Yeah, my topics is to highlight the link between EU countries where diaspora are living, and how can we emphasize the local policy of migration, development, and so on at the local level instead of the high level, which is the European and African, Caribbean, Pacific negotiation. I think this is a very critical issue. How to coordinate and facilitate the proposal from the ground to the European level. Mm-hmm. In terms of migration, settlement, cooperation, and economic relation in a local basis, instead of governmental agreement with wide areas like sub-Saharan Africa region or Caribbean region and so on. I think the main focus must be how to connect the local organization in each 28 countries to join this discussion at a high level.
Yeah, indeed, it is a challenge. I think.
Yeah, it's a big challenge.
To make sure that
but
the voice of the
we are not
people
sure that in each country they are engaged to facilitate this negotiation.
But I don't know how you work as ADEPT, and it could be indeed so the subject of a future webinar. But in Concord, for example, what is working well in Concord is the fact that Concord is a confederation of national platforms of NGOs and also networks. And the national platforms, they provide this link with the individual NGOs in the countries that are working at a more local or lower level. Although, you know, as development NGOs is a bit particular because many of them also working abroad at the end. But at least in terms of development education, citizenship education, and so on, so you have this these organizations based at the national level that are getting together as a national platform. And then you have the networks who are more experts in the sense that they are more focused on certain issues, gender, children rights, migration, so on. And so by combining the two, in a way, what is interesting in the combination is that we can prepare recommendations, positions, papers based on expertise, research, and so on that the network are able to provide, and then you can test that with the national platforms, whether it resonates at the national level, whether it's something that is relevant for the national context, and so on. And then we can also then have the same messages that are going to the policymakers at the EU level here in Brussels and at the national level. So, but this requires a lot of coordination and resource and so on. And Concord, they have a secretariat, and so it's not that easy. And it's true that in general, the problem is more to get the input and the expertise from the local level to make it so from the bottom to the top instead of the contrary. It's always easier to work from the top. So, well, yeah, this is clearly a challenge, and even more in Africa, of course. Because here we have means, we are quite well organized, we have good communication means and so on. So in Africa, sometimes they are really struggling with and also the distance are more important, but they are really struggling in terms of how to coordinate their advocacy work from the lower level to decision making at the regional or the African Union level. So that's why I think it's quite interesting that they succeeded to obtain the possibility to have a consultation organized by the top negotiators with civil society in Africa. Now they have to identify who from civil society will go. They have to find the money to bring the people to Lomé. So it's a lot of challenges. But at least if there is a process and if there is an entry point and people who are ready to listen, then you can organize yourself also to make sure that the voice of the organizations working at local level is somehow
taken into account.
Yeah. But this is it requires a lot of energy and time from motivated people. It's not easy. You're right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's a very important question, connecting local to global, and we have to find means and coordination in time. Thank you very much, Ibra. Just maybe to tell you all that Ibra is coming from FORIM. FORIM is the French national platform of the migrant associations working in development, but also social cohesion in France.
But this is interesting because FORIM is connected with Coordination Sud, as you said. Somebody said that there was a position, so and Coordination Sud is connected with Concord. So, but
FORIM has the mandate to speak on migration and development from Coordination Sud. That's why we we are part of it as well. Yes. Okay, so maybe we don't have much time left. So maybe if you have any other questions, we can grab probably one or two last questions. Oui.
Oui.
Bonjour, c'est Ousmane, c'est ça.
Moi, c'est Ousmane. J'avais juste... on peut poser en français, hein?
Oui.
Oui, merci Karine. Je m'excuse, hein, j'ai pratiquement raté la présentation. Je pense que je suis arrivé à la dernière slide, mais j'avais juste deux questions rapides. Et c'est par rapport à l'Union africaine, parce que je pense que dans le cadre des réformes, il y avait une forte recommandation, les réformes de Kagame, à ce que concernant ces genres d'agréments, que l'Union africaine puisse parler d'une seule voix. Donc, j'aimerais savoir, dans ce cadre, est-ce qu'il y a déjà des initiatives qui ont été menées à ce niveau? Est-ce que vous envisagez un peu d'avoir à la table de discussion une Union africaine avec pratiquement ce représentant? Et deuxièmement, j'aimerais savoir, par rapport aux consultations, est-ce que ce sont les parties elles-mêmes qui se chargent d'organiser leurs propres consultations ou est-ce que Concorde appuie un peu les différentes parties dans le cadre de l'organisation des consultations? Merci.
Merci Ousmane. Oui, donc la question de l'Union africaine, en effet, donc j'en ai parlé un peu dans ma présentation, mais en effet, donc ça c'était l'optique de l'Union africaine est que effectivement l'Union européenne devrait traiter l'Afrique comme une. Parce que l'Union européenne a différents les cadres de coopération avec l'Afrique du Nord, même l'Afrique du Sud en tant que pays, un accord séparé, et puis il y a les ACP, il y a la stratégie conjointe UE, etc. Et donc, effectivement, c'est un peu la cacophonie, et l'Union africaine aimerait être vraiment reconnue comme l'organe principal, le partenaire principal de l'Union européenne en Afrique. Et donc, effectivement, ils avaient espéré que les États membres de l'Union africaine, et principalement de l'Afrique subsaharienne, qui sont les signataires de l'accord de Cotonou, accepteraient que l'Union africaine négocie en quelque sorte pour eux avec l'Union européenne pour avoir un nouveau partenariat Union européenne-Afrique en dehors du groupe ACP. Et donc, il y a eu beaucoup de discussions là-dessus en Afrique. Et finalement, donc, comme je l'ai dit, les membres de l'Union africaine signataires de l'accord de Cotonou dans la majorité d'entre eux, ont préféré garder l'accord de Cotonou et préféré négocier eux-mêmes un nouvel accord avec l'Union européenne, qui est un accord. C'est un accord de coopération finalement. Hein. C'est finalement un accord de comment est-ce qu'on va utiliser l'argent de l'Union européenne en Afrique, le fonds, le Fed, etc. Donc il y a vraiment un intérêt de la part des membres du groupe ACP de continuer cette coopération qui est essentiellement bilatérale finalement, hein, si on regarde comment elle est mise en œuvre. Et par contre, bon, pour le dialogue politique sur sécurité, migration, etc., ce dialogue politique est déjà ailleurs. Hein. Ce n'est pas le groupe ACP qui discute avec l'Union européenne sur les questions de sécurité ou de migration, etc. Il y a le processus de Valletta, il y a le comité sécurité, je ne sais plus comment il s'appelle, mais bon, il y a différents processus de dialogue politique. Il y a même un dialogue sur les droits de l'homme entre l'Union européenne et l'Union africaine, etc. Donc, le dialogue politique, finalement, il échappe déjà au groupe ACP. Donc, finalement, voilà, la décision a été celle-là. Donc, il y aura un accord et il y aura un protocole UE-Afrique dans cet accord qui sera pour les pays de l'Afrique subsaharienne et qui sera essentiellement comment gérer la coopération entre l'Union européenne et l'Afrique subsaharienne. Et à côté de ça, les dialogues politiques qui se tiennent avec l'Union africaine vont continuer. C'est un petit peu comme ça qu'ils ont résolu le problème. Et l'Union africaine va soutenir ces États membres dans la négociation de ce protocole UE-Afrique dans le cadre du futur accord de Cotonou. Je ne sais pas si c'est clair, mais sur le slide, si tu regardes le PowerPoint après, donc là, il y a les stats en anglais et en français, j'explique un petit peu, mais sinon, je suis prête à donner d'autres informations par après, par email ou quoi que ce soit si nécessaire. Alors, il y avait l'autre question sur... C'était quoi encore l'autre question? Sorry.
Ousmane,
Ousmane, la deuxième question, je ne sais plus. Ah oui, sur les consultations. Ouais, oui. Ouais. Ben, Concorde, en fait, Concorde, ils essayent de coordonner les messages de leurs membres vers l'Union européenne. Hein. Donc, on a un groupe de travail qui coordonne le travail de plaidoyer sur UE-ACP, qui se réunit régulièrement avec des personnes qui viennent des plateformes nationales, plus les réseaux, et on travaille ensemble à développer des messages, on organise des séminaires, etc. Mais après ça, au niveau national, les plateformes membres de Concorde, dans certains cas, organisent aussi des séminaires, des consultations ou approchent leur gouvernement sur ces questions-là en se coordonnant avec Bruxelles, mais je veux dire, il se peut très bien que par exemple Coordination Sud développe sa propre position sur la migration dans le cadre UE-ACP de façon indépendante. Mais si, par exemple, Coordination Sud organise un séminaire, par exemple, ils avaient organisé un séminaire, je pense, en 2017, sur UE-ACP, ils avaient invité la Commission européenne et je suis venue à Paris pour les aider, pour participer à la discussion, etc. Donc ça, c'est possible aussi que les membres du groupe de travail s'impliquent au niveau national quand il y a des consultations ou des séminaires qui sont organisés. Je ne sais pas si c'était ça la question. Mais par contre, je ne pense pas qu'il y ait un budget pour ça. Si c'était ça la question au niveau de l'appui financier, je ne pense pas.
Oui, merci beaucoup Karine, Ousmane. Donc, je ne sais pas si c'était clair pour vous. De toutes les façons, on va partager la présentation de Karine avec vous. Et vous allez avoir aussi l'enregistrement de ce webinaire disponible. On va vous tous envoyer avec un mail séparé. Okay, so we are practically running out of time. I don't know if there are other questions. I don't know, it's time. If not, maybe I would like to thank Karine once again for this amazing and very interesting presentation of such a complex issue. And of course, we will continue with the second webinar in which we will try to deepen a bit more the question of diaspora engagement in this process. And together with Karine and other colleagues from Concord, we will try to schedule the next webinar. I don't know, Karine, maybe October. We've been talking about October. But anyways, we will keep you posted. And thank you very much again for your time and for your patience and for your interest in the topic. And Karine, thank you as well.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. And yeah, let's maintain the contact and see how we can proceed for the future. I think it's good to keep the contact with Concord Secretariat for the next webinar. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you very much. And merci beaucoup à tous et à tous pour votre temps.
Bonne soirée.
Présentation et à Karine, encore une fois, pour l'expertise incroyable qu'elle a partagée avec nous. Donc, pour le webinaire suivant, on va vous tenir informés. Donc, ça va être un webinaire plus pratique où on va essayer d'explorer les façons et les manières dont la diaspora africaine peut s'engager dans ce processus, sous quelle forme, sous quel format, dans quel espace, voilà, sachant qu'il y a les consultations qui arrivent à Lomé en octobre. Donc, si il y a une possibilité de faire des contributions, de s'engager. Donc, on doit explorer la possibilité de voir comment est-ce qu'on peut le faire pour que la diaspora africaine soit entendue et soit consultée aussi dans ce processus qui la concerne. Finalement aussi. Donc, merci beaucoup et la présentation va être partagée par mail avec vous ainsi que l'enregistrement de ce webinaire. Donc, on se voit bientôt.
Merci. Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.